Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone that's joining us from all around the world. My name is Eric. I'm with forceAnywhere. I'm joined today with Ben over at the famous Salesforce, Ben. And today we are kickstarting talking about starting a Salesforce, either freelancing or consulting business. From my side, for those that don't know, I have been in the Salesforce ecosystem for over 10 years, consulting for just about that long. Until recently, where we decided to start I'm becoming the co-founder of forceAnywhere, which we're hoping to make it the hub for Salesforce freelancers and consultants. With that, I'll pass it to you, Ben. I'll let you intro yourself for anyone that may not be aware of you and your background.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So nice to see everyone. My name is Ben McCarthy, founder of SalesforceBen.com. So I've got coming up to 10 years experience in the Salesforce ecosystem. I've worked across loads of different roles. I'm a bit of a job hopper. So I've worked for ISVs, for consultancies as an admin. More recently, I founded my own co-founded my own consultancy, I should say, about 4.5 years ago, called Empower, based in London. So I worked there for 4 years, left last year to work full-time on Salesforce Ben. But this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. I've actually written a book and an ebook and template pack after I left my consultancy called Secrets of Building a Salesforce Consultancy. I think it's a very logical choice for a lot of people to want to go freelancing or want to build a consultancy. So that's available on my website. But very, very happy to be here today with Eric and looking forward to today. So we've got a bunch of questions here, which is going to go through different aspects of starting a Salesforce business, specifically in the freelancing or if you want to go a bit bigger and start your own consultancy. So let's kick off with the first question. So Eric, obviously you need technical Salesforce skills if you're going to be a Salesforce freelancer or start your own consultancy. But what non-technical Salesforce skills are important?
Yeah, it's a great question to kick it off, right? Because a lot of people have this experience in Salesforce, and whether they're doing administration for several years, and they're looking to make a couple of bucks on the side as a freelancer or starting their own consulting practice, making that big jump. So obviously, some experience in a implementation setting would be good. Having some experience with project management and being able to organize things accordingly. Many administrators can at times just have experience of being told what to do and finding the functionalities. So definitely some project management experience is necessary. But the big one, which I think we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about today, is obviously the business development side of things, and having some experience with that business development, being able to easily network and easily adapt to certain situations, to be able to have a little bit of persistence and resilience, especially when starting out, because it does. I think we're going to talk about a lot of different ways that someone can start their own practice today and find their leads and opportunities, but it does take a bit of a hustle to get there, especially when you're trying to make a name for yourself that others may not be aware of. So those are some of the big things. I'll pass it to you though, Ben, because you certainly have some experience. That'd be interesting to hear, especially from the UK side. How does one go ahead about like getting some commercial experience? How does one, learn more if they're currently in a technical role and that doesn't get too much exposure for this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think just to emphasize, if you are freelancing or starting your own consultancy, the commercial aspect is very, very important. You're eventually going to be closing deals, which could be small to start off with, but could easily go into 10,000 plus, 20,000 plus, or go up to 6 figures. Another important aspect of this is a lot of freelancers or consultancies will work very heavily with Salesforce. And if anyone knows Salesforce, they are a big commercial machine. So knowing how to close deals and help them close deals and move deals along is very important. I personally got a lot of commercial experience because I was kind of thrown into the deep end co-founding a consultancy. So that's how I got it. But if you're an admin or something like that, and you're not exposed to that commercial side, I would say if you're in a position to be in a sales organization, running Sales Cloud, actually sitting down with users, which I'm sure a lot of people do anyway, just to understand the kind of conversations that take place. Something that I think is just a random kind of bit of knowledge that I think is quite important when you're consulting or trying to close a deal is by putting pressure on the person you're trying to sell to actually close the deal by saying, you've only got so much capacity or anything like that. Because if no pressure is applied, there's no reason for them to close a deal with you unless they kind of get the motivation to do it themselves. So getting any exposure to the commercial side, if you're in a sales organization, is very important. But a lot of it is just through experience, picking up the phone and doing cold calls, trying to do things like that. It's a learning process, and it's a bit scary as well if you're from a technical background. But it's just like anything; if you practice it, then you can learn it. So yeah, I think those are a few things. I don't know. How about you, Eric? How did you learn all about that side?
Yeah, so it's interesting. My background, I was a Salesforce admin for a couple of years for different software companies, and I was running marketing for them. So I did get a lot of exposure on the business side. And funny enough, I was just the de facto Salesforce admin. So one of the great benefits for me at that time was that I was involved in the sales process. I was involved in the handoff to implementation process. So I always got a little bit of an exposure. So it's interesting that I actually come from the business development side and got consumed by the Salesforce ecosystem and found my way through that. But one of the biggest things, at least taking that into consideration, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, is that ultimately a good freelancer, a good consultant can put themselves in the business development shoes and the company's shoes as someone who doesn't understand Salesforce and has a problem and is looking for a solution with Salesforce. So being able to put yourself in their shoes, understand and their point of view, and be able to provide a solution and say, look, I understand what you guys are going through. I know how we can get there with Salesforce, and I can make this offer for you. I think the rest, obviously there's negotiation, there's building contracts, there's so much that we can talk about today. But if you get that core piece together when you're in front of a company and bridge that gap between a business problem and the technical solution, I think you have what it takes to become a great freelancer. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose one important thing that's also good to talk about, and this is something that that anyone who's kind of become or gone into a consultancy has find out, especially me, is you really need to focus down on a niche. Especially when you're dealing with Salesforce. So for those that have started a consultancy or freelancers that have built a network inside of Salesforce, which is a fantastic lead source, every deal that Salesforce closes, they want a freelancer or a partner to be on that deal. If Salesforce just close a deal and there's no partner, the customer might self-implement and they might leave Salesforce because they're very unhappy with their self-implementation. So it's very important to find a niche when you're founding a consultancy or doing a freelancer, which is mostly, it could be in a product area. So you could really double down on communities or CPQ and billing or something like that. It just means that you are way more likely to win those kinds of deals than if you're a jack of all trades, master of none, pointing out that, hey, we're available to take any deal you want, any industry, any product. But that also goes for industry as well. So personally, when we co-founded Empower in London, we really focused on the financial services and fintech niche. And we built up relationships inside of Salesforce. We got loads of customer references, and it just kind of snowballed after that. And the most successful consultancies or freelancers that I've seen in the UK, they all have a niche, whether it be a product or a vertical niche. And I suppose you've probably seen something similar in the US, Eric.
Yeah, I definitely have. There's, especially recently, I think recently it's starting to get, and over the last couple of years, I'm definitely starting to see the rise of very focused Salesforce practices. Actually, funny enough, just recently I saw someone that was doing a specific CPQ Salesforce partnership, consulting firm. There's been Pardot focused ones for quite some time. So there is a lot that's out there that is very specific, and a lot more people are trying to kind of figure that out. And that's just, I think, a consequence of Salesforce growing, because 5 years ago, it was still relatively possible to be on top of all things Salesforce. But today, there's just so many different clouds and so many different avenues that, there is specialization. It's difficult to distinguish yourself as a freelancer, as a consultant, by just saying you're a jack of all trades. So Which, by the way, just a big shout out to everyone listening in. We do get to see everyone's comments. I appreciate. We'll try to tackle in some of the questions. I see a couple of familiar faces making some comments there. So, big hi to everyone there. But Ben, I think one of the questions, we're talking about kind of like being in front, distinguishing yourself. But from my experience, and I think the UK is similar, well, the fastest way to getting customers, in theory, or the best way I would argue, is through Salesforce account executives. Account executives, you mentioned earlier on, they hold the keys to the kingdom in some ways, because they're talking to the individuals, they're talking to the companies, they're trying to sell it. And if you get introduced in the deal as the partner, then you have a very high chance of closing that deal. But there may be freelancers out there that don't know where to start, don't know how to get going. I guess let's get into the conversation with AEs, and we should talk about whether you should or you shouldn't. But I'll start with from your perspective, what's the best way to work with a Salesforce account executive, Ben?
Yeah, so yeah, I think you put it very nicely there. Salesforce AEs do hold the keys to the kingdom. If you build good relationships inside of Salesforce and with Salesforce AEs, you will have a constant lead stream coming in. And obviously that is not easy to achieve. It's not like you can rock up, speak to a few AEs and suddenly start getting leads. It takes time. You have to build relationships. You have to prove yourself as someone that doesn't just want to receive leads, but wants to also help them move a deal along. Personally, the way that I built a lot of good relationships inside of Salesforce, and it's a slow process. You might, let's say you've got a one account that you work with as a freelancer. It's a very good idea to find out who the AE is on that account, give them a call, tell them what you're doing with this customer. This is all information that they're going to want to hear. And when you start working with that AE, maybe ask them to introduce you to another one. But one big value add that Salesforce AEs love is if you as a consultant can help this deal along, and that's where the commercial experience comes into it. If a Salesforce AE invites you to a in-person or Zoom meeting or something like that, and you can really help them sell the value of Salesforce for Salesforce as a whole, but also for the specific industry. So something that I used to do a lot was just name drop. I used to name drop what we've done for this company over here that's in the same industry, or this company, or maybe their competitor or something like that. And they would just love it because they would see that we've done that before. We're proven in this space, in this product, in this industry. And that means that the deal is probably going to be more likely to close. The AE is going to get a nice bit of commission, and they're probably going to introduce you to their team, their manager, and other people in the organization. And that's a really, really valid way. And the way that I would say most consultancies in the UK grow. I would say it's not uncommon for people to see 70% plus of their leads coming directly from Salesforce from a consultancy point of view. And I'm not too familiar. I've never been a freelancer myself, but I know, Eric, you work with a lot of AEs similar to the way that I did in the UK.
Yeah, so I agree with everything you said on that side. And from my end, it has been a very similar experience of, we have to think about this as a win-win relationship. If you're going to an account executive just by saying, oh, give me deals, you're not going to get your foot in the door. And I think Brian McFarlane made the comment, I'll start with the very first and foremost, if someone's going to introduce you, you have to be a registered Salesforce partner. It doesn't take a lot to become a registered Salesforce partner. There's tons that you can look into and figure out how to do that. But so long as you have the basic certifications, you can technically get started and be registered. So being registered is the very first and foremost thing you need to do, because that's going to give credibility to the account executive as he introduces you to someone and say, hey, here's the certified partner that I work with, right? And kind of make that introduction. But the second piece that you have to consider, much like you said, is, how much value do you add to the pre-sales process? And usually that comes afterwards, because you have to earn your way to be introduced. And the way to earn it is exactly what you said. Take the clients that you already work on, take people that you've already been working with, and what can you add to that? Because sales reps account executives don't look to grow only by acquiring new customers. They try to expand the current spend of the existing customer. So if you can, with your ear to the ground or closer to the customer, can say, look, I think there's a real good pitch here for high velocity sales with these customers, or I think that they may be a really good use case for a Pardot or field service lightning. And if you can find opportunities, right, to open the door for these account executives, that's the best way to start opening that relationship to start being introduced to other deals. Anything that you'd want to add, or maybe that we haven't covered?
No, I think I think you've covered it off nicely there. But I think the key thing is to add value. I used to know a consultancy in London where they had junior salespeople and they were targeted to call AEs like a certain number of times per week. Just pestering, just asking for deals. That is the wrong thing to do. They will just get annoyed with you and not want to work with you. So adding value is, I think the key thing there. I've just seen a question from Rodrigo. Hi, Rodrigo, that says, what would be your suggestions to get started as a freelancer, like major things, website, and things like that. And I suppose that kind of segues quite nicely onto our next session about different lead sources that you can achieve. And then, I mean, I would say just to answer part of your question, Rodrigo, I would say, website and things like that are definitely a good way to go. It's a good way to show off your experience and show that you're an actual company. I wouldn't go mad with spending money on graphic designers and getting logos made up. You can use things like Webflow or WordPress to make a really professional looking website. Same with the presentations and stuff like that. I try and make it look good and slick, but not spend a huge amount of money. But I think the main thing is lead sources for getting deals. So I mean, Eric, what would you say are some other lead sources apart from Salesforce?
Yeah, so we put a ton of content on forceAnywhere on specifically this. I did a video with 3 of my methods. The 2 main ones, the original method for me this was back in the day, but I think it still applies. Takes a little bit of hustle, but just be out there in the community. There's a lot of people asking questions for help. So when I got started when I started getting more interested in Salesforce, this was before Trailhead, before any of these things, there was a success community and people would ask questions. And what I would do was that I would try to spin up a dev org, create that problem, and somehow try to resolve it myself as a way to increase my skills. Because again, no Trailheads, no exercises. At best at the time, I think we had those flashcards, like those terribly put together flashcards of information for the admin exam. And I started helping people out. And at some point, those people, after we figured those problems out, they came to me and said, hey, can you give me a hand? We're looking for someone to give us a hand, a project manager for this implementation project, because we can't seem to figure it out. And that's literally how I got my first deal. I got a full-time consulting contract with them for 3 months, full-time. I think it was at $65 an hour at the time, which was well beyond what I could have expected. And it worked out really well. So being able to network your way, this might take a while, but if you fine-tune your craft, you can simplify it where if you're helping people out, have a 1-pager ready of description of what you are, or at least as you answer, once they say, hey, this helped out, or this was useful, kind of say, yeah, absolutely. If you need any help, let me know. I am an independent consultant. I am a freelancer. I can give, if it's something of interest, I'd be happy to help, take a look at your Salesforce, see if I can give you any pointers, and build the relationship that way. The fact that you've answered a question already and builds some rapport to say, okay, well, this guy understood my problem. He was able to help me in this particular thing. Maybe I can talk to him and get to know a little bit more, especially if they're small organizations, which is probably why they're there to begin with, asking for help on boards, because they don't have a full staff of Salesforce experts to put together their solutions. And the second one is, and I've done this as well, and I think this is one of the easiest ones, is if you have people that you've worked for in the past that use Salesforce, go to them. Just say, hey, long time no speak. I've now become, a Salesforce independent consultant, and I'm, just getting started, getting a couple of things. Their business. You've worked for them long enough to understand how the business works. You probably understand how the Salesforce org, if the org was there in place, how that works. And it's not going to be a contract that, they'll never pay you what your full-time salary was, but it'll get you started, right? And more importantly, which I think leads into the scaling component of what we're going to talk about, make sure to take that opportunity to build it into a referral, build it into a review, right? Where someone can give a scathing review about your services that helps people in the future that you come across to say, okay, well, here's people that are talking good about their implementation or that are willing to act as referral sources or reference sources for this person's work. And then really try to hone in on building that review structure.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with the last part about reaching out to people who've used Salesforce before. And I think that's why it's important to always have a social media strategy to some degree. Social media is never going to get you hundreds of leads a month. Actually, it's going to be down the list in terms of lead source, but it's still good for that awareness. I got loads of people throughout my 4-year stinting running a Salesforce consultancy that reached out to me just because they've got me on LinkedIn, and also people that I went to university with or school with that I know that use Salesforce and need help. So those are very, very valid ways. I would also add on a few kind of marketing things that you can do if you're looking to set up a consultancy. So one of the best ways to generate leads are notoriously hard to generate in this space. And I always compare it to, if you're selling Calendly or something like that, Calendly is cool. You can install a free trial, you get a lead. With consulting, you're talking about big projects that have really no tangible outcome until you start going through the sales process. But a great way to get leads is webinars, which is one thing that we did a fair bit about. So focusing on thought leadership content, and this is the same with blogging or anything like that. You shouldn't be tooting your own horn so much. Talking about customer success stories are great, but not all the time. You need to supplement that with thought leadership content, things that you've done in a specific industry or things that you've seen with a specific product, Salesforce product, or just talking about Salesforce industry in general. We did one a few weeks ago that I partnered with my old consultancy, which was called How to Health Check Your Salesforce Org. And this was really successful for awareness and getting their brand out there. So quite a few ways. It's never easy, but loads of ways to explore. Another way, actually, just to mention is LinkedIn is pretty fantastic. It's a lot of work, but if you can search for which companies have Salesforce by putting, if you type in Salesforce admin or something like that, you can actually see the companies that are going to have Salesforce and might need some extra help. So there's a few things to think about there.
Yeah, and all very good. I can definitely share some firsthand experiences of, I've tried to pursue an industry niche at a time and using LinkedIn, and it is a lot of work. But again, it's if you don't have customers right now and you have, in theory, some time in your hands, it takes that follow up and building those relationships. It might be something that takes a couple of outreaches to get a conversation going. Definitely don't be that guy who says, hey, take on my Salesforce services, and try to resolve everything that or to push everything that way. But, try to open, a line of conversation that you can follow up with every now and then. There's an interesting trend here. A couple of people are asking about, like niches to focus on. I'll put my 2 cents really quick, just kind of going back to the niche. And, Ben, if you want to put yours in as well. I am a big believer that artificial intelligence is going to be the next big thing. I think that, there's a lot that's happening right now with Einstein Analytics with regards to being able to make this more accessible and easier to implement. So at least on my side, if there's a niche that I would recommend someone to focus on, although they're all valid answers and there's enough market for all of the different niches, I'd argue, CPQ, whatever the case, I would say if you force me to choose one, I would say Einstein Analytics is the one I would recommend someone to focus on. But Ben, I don't know if you have a particular niche that you'd recommend from everyone that's, making the comments out there.
Yeah, I think one which sticks out in terms of product is CPQ and billing. I think it's important to look at the new products that Salesforce are bringing out. They've brought out rebate management. That might not be one to focus on unless you have experience from that from that background. But stuff like CPQ and billing is quite a new product, so there's probably not a lot of consultancies who focus on that. But I would say you also want to be looking at the industries in your area and maybe having a conversation with Salesforce to find out which industries you have experience in and which they are lacking with support. So it will be, Salesforce will know the industries that don't have support because they're potentially using one partner for absolutely everything, and that partner charges loads, and they're looking for more of a SMB partner to come in financial services, manufacturing, whatever. And you have to look at your own background and find out what experience you have. Obviously, not much point trying to double down on financial services if you have no financial service experience. But we had great success by finding a niche in a vertical, and not really in a product. We did kind of sales, service, community, marketing cloud, Pardot, nothing really out of the ordinary. Marketing cloud is still very in demand. We got a lot of success by doubling down on marketing cloud, although the resources are pretty hard to hire for. So pros and cons, but yeah, there's a few.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think, again, I think they're all valid answers because specialization in it of itself is still fairly new in the ecosystem. So I think that if you pick something that makes sense that you can go after, I think that can work really well. So kind of thinking it through and passing this back to you, how do you scope projects? I mean, you worked on the commercial side. We talked a little bit about getting started, about getting a website, getting some basic things, but, assuming we've managed to sit in front of a customer, how do you scope a project then?
Yeah, sure. So we would usually be introduced by Salesforce. So it would kind of be a warm introduction, which was quite nice. They would say we're a trusted partner. We would usually have a phone call, very high level, 30 minutes, find out a bit of high level things about their project, about their business. But the main event and the main thing you're trying to push people towards is the workshop. More expensive partners, like enterprisey partners, will probably charge for the workshop. We would usually do it for free. If it was more than we'd usually do 2-3 hours for free, and if it was like days of work, we would usually charge. But you're kind of going into dodgy territory there because you're trying to sell to a customer a bigger project, but then also saying, hey, we need some money to scope the project, which is a bit of an awkward conversation. But I would say 90% of the workshops we did were free. You would then sit in a meeting room or a Zoom call with yourself, maybe a consultant with you, and then the stakeholders from the other side of the business, talking through everything at a fairly high level, not down to the detail of what do you want to call your fields, but trying to work out what their sales process is, what the stages you're going to need, if you're going to need integration with systems, things like that, but keeping it fairly high level. Then it would move to a statement of work, which again, we would keep it higher level because we usually did fixed cost or time and materials for bigger projects, which and the paid scoping exercises usually had detailed user stories with them, but the lower cost ones didn't. So we could keep things higher level, but put in a lot of assumptions and a lot of diagrams and things to support the statement of work. But I would say the main two activities that we did was that workshop, and then moving towards a statement of work, which detailed everything we were going to do for them. And then that was the document that the customer signed off on. So yeah, I spent the majority of my time at Empower doing this was my job, doing workshops, doing statement of work. So yeah, that was I got fairly good at those. But how about you, Eric? Have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, a couple of, I mean, we could have a whole session. We could take an hour talking about how to build proposals and proposal strategies and, when to charge versus when not to charge. But I think a couple of key things to highlight is that, especially when you're starting out, being able to give some work for free, be it the blueprinting session or the workshops, those are key things to break down the barrier, because you just have to think, what is everything that's against me as I'm trying to talk to this person, right? It may be that I'm just starting out and I don't have that many clients. I don't have that many experience. Maybe I didn't get the warm intro by a Salesforce account executive. Maybe they just found me online and they're still, I still have to build that trust. So the more that you can give right in the front and to help them get familiarized with you, help build that trust, which is all a contract is. I trust you that you're going to be able to give me the value that I'm hoping for, right? And I trust it enough to be able to sign on the dotted line. So that's, I think one of the big things to highlight is being able to give that free component. But from a business process perspective, usually it's fairly similar to what you said. It's a discovery call on our end, get the basic conversation there, understand the size of the scope. And usually I've played it by ear and I've tried it many different ways. But at some point in time, we'll sit down and do a basic blueprint or workshop session of understanding and kind of trying to put a technical solution together based on what the problems are. So that way we can put a number to it. I am, if I don't have two monitor screens, I am utterly useless at this. I'll have to resort back to pen and paper. It's just an interesting thing is that, but if I can take down all the notes and I'll just take, very chicken scratch notes, just very simple, kind of like, running on the fly and typing in as I'm on the call, or I'll write it down on paper, literally. And then what I do afterwards is that when I go to write the proposal, I make sure that I can scratch off every note that I had, right? So that way I took that into consideration for the proposal to help show them that, hey, I've paid attention to what we're talking about and make sure that I left no stone unturned. It could be a very simple note at the beginning, but it's just one of the tricks that I've used to help. And then one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, and this is through experience, I've messed this up many times to get it to this level, is that a lot of times customers will just say, oh, give me a number, give me a price, give me a number. And the best way that I found out to manage that is that on my proposals, I'll usually write the scope of work first. And I'll even I'll put the prices together. I'll have an idea of the hours. But before I send the hours and the price, I'll send them just the scope of work to say, here's what I understood from our conversations. Can you confirm for me that this is what we talked about, or if there's anything that's missing? Because that way they see, especially if it's a long list of things to do, they see that there's going to be a lot of work to be done. And if they say yes, then right after it, I'll send the proposal with the hours. That way they can sit and I can warm myself into the conversation if it's going to be a lot of hours to be able to say, look, guys, we are asking for a lot of things. There are a lot of things that we can deliver on this, right? This is what it is. And I found that helped a lot when it came to avoiding people ghosting you when you just gave proposals and then you just never heard back again. So just one of the big things, at least that I've learned in putting the proposals together, right, and or during a proposal phase, and the notes and how I take the notes and how I scope my projects out. So
yeah, you've actually reminded me about because I haven't taken notes like that detailed since I used to do workshops, but I had a kind of system and yeah, scratching them off as you go through when you're doing a statement of work. Yeah, miss those days. And I suppose we've kind of segued into the next part, which is tricks to close deals, and I think we've touched on a few of them. So I think obviously a big commercial one that we touched on at the start is applying pressure any way you can. Obviously, you don't want to be creating unnecessary pressure, but a trick that Salesforce use is they try to identify at the start of a engagement with a customer why they are doing this project. Is it because they've got targets to hit, or their system is just so old that it's causing all their users pain, and then they will kind of use that back to them. So they will say, well, at the start of this engagement, you told us these problems, and we'd love to help you fix them, and that kind of reminds them of why they started up the project. But I think just to kind of add on something that Erick said about the statement of work is I used to treat the statement of work like the kind of holy document, because after you've gone through that whole scoping exercise and you've met them in person, this is essentially the document they are going to sign off on. And if they don't feel that you've captured their requirements properly, or it's confusing, or there's spelling mistakes, or it looks unprofessional, this can kind of negate any good conversations you've had previously, because this is the document they're going to sign off on. And I love that thing that you said, Erick, about sending it over with just the requirements, because I think that can really help. But yeah, closing deals, it's an art form, especially if you're not from a commercial background.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. And there's a couple of other tricks, at least very quick, shout them out. I think we've covered them in detail in other videos, or at least I've covered in other videos that I've done, and we can talk about that later. But very simply, some things that I've done is to spin up a dev org. never do it on their own sandbox, but I've spun up a dev org and I've built a solution that they're looking for, or at least a proof of concept of what they're looking for on a dev org, and I've demoed it to them there. I have learned the hard way that if you do it in their sandbox, they can very easily lock you out of the sandbox and use what you've done anyhow. But the idea is that you can start doing the work. Even if you have an idea, let's just say it's a project that's going to take 20, 25 hours. You start the work, do the 5-10 hours on a dev org, roll the dice, especially if you're starting, and offer to do it for them, and say, look, I'll do this proof of concept for you. If this is what you're looking for, then we continue, we sign the contract, we continue, and we finalize, and then use that to keep the conversation going, right, as you're trying to go through your business process and you start doing some work. Again, building trust. That's the big piece that you got to put together. And then that way, if they like it, you do the proof of concept and they like it, and they're like, yeah, I think this is pretty much on point. Then you're like, okay, well, let's make sure we have something in writing now. And that way, what I'll do is that as soon as we get this going, I'll deploy this to a sandbox from this dev org that I've created to a sandbox of yours. So that way I can just pick up the work from there. And guess what? All of the work that you've done, or at least the vast majority of the work that you've done, will probably already kickstart your project, right? To give you a decent progress bump, right? And hopefully shorten the time from the time that you sign a document to you deliver. So that's one trick that I've used a couple of times in the earlier days that have helped me tremendously. As a solo consultant or as an independent consultant, you have to have the band. That does take a little bit of bandwidth to be able to execute. But if you're starting off, presumably you have the bandwidth because you don't have that many projects to begin with. So I would say that's probably the one trick I'd like to share that I think would probably be a good one for people starting out.
Just one thing to add on there, actually, that I probably should have mentioned when we discussed working with Salesforce AEs, but Salesforce AEs they use solution engineers to do the pre-sales, so to build demos and to answer the more technical questions. Solution engineers are quite a rare resource inside of Salesforce, so they're always constantly in demand. So if you can fill that gap for a solution engineer, you can build the demos, you can answer the more technical questions in the meetings with the AEs. They won't need to rely on their solution engineers so much, and they will love you for it.
100%. Yeah. That's a very good observation. Yeah. So yeah, solution engineers are rare in the Salesforce workspace, and the AEs will try to pull them into meetings as much as they can because it really helps make a difference. So if you as a partner can go in and say and make that case, but I do want to put one item here, one thing to consider that we haven't talked about, which is, should you work with account executives? Because one of the big things that I want to bring up, and we're talking about, starting a consulting and scaling a consulting, or just being an independent freelancer. One of the expectations in building a relationship with a Salesforce account executive is that you're there to take on the projects. They don't want to introduce you only for you to not be able to take the deal, or if you say, yeah, but I can only start in 4 weeks or 5 weeks. There is kind of like a demand or an expectation that you'll be there at the call and you can meet that demand. So, just a word of warning, to be fair to all Salesforce account executives out there, the Salesforce account executive route is a good route if you're looking to scale, if you're looking to bring in extra bodies, if you're looking to be able to tackle more people in your organization, tackle more projects, and because a well-developed Salesforce relationship usually yields quite a bit more deals. And it would be a disservice to any account executive if you're just doing it for your own personal, starting point, and you don't intend to be able to sustain that demand that you may incur by nurturing this relationship. So if it's that case, I don't want to turn you away from Salesforce freelancing or consulting, but I would say try to work more on finding Salesforce customers that could turn into managed services. Smaller organizations of anywhere between 1 to 50 users that can't justify hiring a full-time Salesforce administrator, but you can be a consultant for at 20, 30, 40 hours a month, something like that, and get 2 or 3 of those and you'll be set as a freelancer for quite some time. So, and that maybe is a separate conversation for a different time, but I wanted to at least bring that point up because, a lot of times people are just like, oh, just give me AEs, just introduce me to AEs. And I'm like, dude, it's, let's think it through. Like there's considerations for it. So,
yeah. So let's just cover off this business development section with a bit about marketing. So maybe Erick, you can speak a bit about from a freelancer point of view, and then I can speak about from a consultancy point of view. So how much effort should you spend on marketing, and what activities should you try and perform, if any?
Yeah. So I hope Julia is listening, because I'll jump into one of the Q&A questions, because I think I really enjoyed how she asked, what's the best way to start a Salesforce business with under 109, presumably dollars or pounds, as an initial investment? And I really got a kick out of that one because it was very precise. So if you're starting out as a freelancer, I think it is important to have a website. People need to be able to find you. It could be simple, Ben, as you said. It does not have to be, crazy in terms of what you're spending in graphic design or anything like that. Just something very simple to get going. And but the vast majority of what you need to be doing is building a brand for yourself, or building a name for yourself, and doing your outreaches. So I would say that it is going to be a lot of LinkedIn outreaches, which is, free and inexpensive, and trying to do your research of what companies are looking for, for Salesforce people that you may be able to say, hey, I'm a Salesforce expert. Instead of hiring, maybe there's a better opportunity in just using a contractor. Use your hook, like I can do a free proof of concept or whatever it is to try to get in the door. But from a marketing perspective, really, that's really the starting point. I think there's tons of other things like email campaigns and other items that just take time to set up, and it's not as direct. And one of the biggest benefits of being a small guy is that you can have that flexibility of just reaching out. Like you can just be direct, right? Just let's just get a conversation going. Let's just get something started. Let me understand more about your problems or your challenges with Salesforce, right? And I'll do this for free, because newsflash, large organizations, large consulting companies also do this for free. But you can go much more direct and get to the core point of it without having to schedule endless workshops, loop in 10 different team members, and go from there. So yeah, for me, getting started on the marketing side, I would say get your website going, get a simple form together just to have something to point people to. But beyond that, it's really try to, save your money. Don't invest in crazy LinkedIn ads or things like that, but just really try to get in the door with someone else and spend all of your time on that. I would say that's probably the big one for you.
Yeah, it's I would say it's maybe slightly different, just because with a consultancy, I suppose when you're starting up, it's similar. You don't want to go too crazy, but as you start scaling, Salesforce kind of expect you to do a lot of marketing, because they don't want to just sit there with you receiving leads from them. They also expect you to go out there and market your services and therefore Salesforce's products, usually by using previous customer success stories or anything like that. So putting on events is big business in the Salesforce consulting world. Salesforce will usually partner with you, provide a little bit of budget, and you provide a little bit of budget as well. Putting on an event to do. We did one with Pardot before. We did one with financial services, and then inviting people from that niche along, prospects and customers, which is quite good because they can network with each other. Happy customers, obviously. So that's a few things. But I think one thing that I'd like to point out, and this is kind of coming from my expertise running a blog, is content is something that should always be focused on. If you're a consultant or a freelancer. I mean, Erick talks about building a brand for yourself, and you can do that through content, whether it's blogs or videos or anything like that, and putting it out on social media. But for a consultancy, specifically if you're looking to drive people to a website, a blog is very, very useful for SEO. If you want to become the top person in your city, if you type in, Salesforce Consulting London, then content is going to do that and it's going to boost your ranking with Google. So there's a few ways, but I would say one of the most powerful things is customer success stories. When you're presenting to new customers, or if you're presenting to Salesforce, those things are really, really important.
Yeah, I think first off, it's kind of funny that I gave that answer.
Run over a little bit of time, but we've
yeah. I mean, we can jump into some Q&A, but it's kind of funny that I asked a blogger what are some of the marketing activities, and I left out the content piece out there. But look, I agree with you there. I think ultimately one of the biggest pieces is that it works. It depends on what budget you're working with, right? So again, if it's Julia that's listening in and you have $109, you may not have a lot of ability to run some events. But if you're looking to scale and you're interested in making the investment, the bigger question at the end of the day is, what kind of return can I expect from something like this? And if you can justify that, hey, these events would probably be attended by people where I can get a $30,000 to $50,000 project and I have to make a $5,000, $10,000 investment, sure, you may be able to justify making that investment. But I think it's definitely different strategies for different people, because again, if the goal is to be an independent consultant, then, you have 3 clients, you're managing maybe, or if you have 3 managed service clients, or if you're managing 6 implementations at any given time, you don't theoretically need to go all out. But I will give the Salesforce Ben credit that content is king. And I think one of the interesting ways for someone to build a blog, not only to call attention, but build a blog to answer questions. So I think the same way that as I started, I was trying to help people out with questions. I would say that we've done it a couple of times, not as much as I'd like, but when you have time on your hands, dedicate time to make our articles about interesting solutions you put together. You don't have to name the customer, blank out, white label all the stuff. You don't have to say who you did this for. But if you came up with an interesting solution, write some content about it, right? Start a YouTube channel where you can do these videos, or just start writing blog posts, because a lot of people out there, and I did this research, by the way, a lot of people in the Salesforce ecosystem in particular is way more attuned to blogs than they are to videos. At least that's what I find from my research. Although I don't want to write an hour worth of this conversation, so that's probably why we're doing this in video. But at least that's I think that's my insights on the marketing piece. But anything you'd like to finish off with, or should we jump to some Q&A?
I think let's jump to some Q&A. We've got 30 minutes left, so let's blast through.
Let's do this. So Julia already answered that one. I'll give you this one. I think this will be a good one. So Emma asked, what tips do you have on how to scale your consultancy from 1 person to more? Ben.
Yeah, that is a hard question to answer. I mean, a lot of the consultancies that I've seen in the UK, a lot of them do have some kind of investment. Where that investment comes from is, maybe find an angel investor or a bank or Salesforce Ventures or something like that. A lot of them do start with that, which isn't the best answer if you don't have anyone to invest or anything like that. Other people that I've seen do it who haven't got investment have either got a big project that they've needed to hire more people for, or if you're kind of working with smaller projects, it's hard to balance that for an individual and kind of balance utilized. And I've found start, if you don't have investment, is by using junior people that are on much lower salaries, so it's a bit more flexible. Ideally you'd like to hire a very senior consultant that can take all these projects off your hands and run them themselves, but that's not always going to be possible. And if they're then not utilized and you don't close the projects that you wanted to, then you could be in a bit of a dodgy situation. Or using offshore or nearshore resources to support you with your projects as well. That's obviously a lot more flexible, much more of a flexible option, and it can provide you a bit more power, a bit more woman power for your projects before actually committing to hiring someone full time, because it's a big deal, right? You've got to pay a pension and someone's salary and provide for them and potentially their family as well. So it's definitely a big consideration, but you need to ensure you've got enough in the pipeline, you've got a steady lead source, and potentially using some flexible options if possible to kind of provide a bit of a safer way until you are hiring someone. So that's how I would do it. But anything to add there, Eric?
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is that it's taking steps as you grow. So I would say just make sure that, don't try to go for an enterprise level customer, right? If you're a solo consultancy, try to make sure that you focus on some projects that you can manage, that are technically where you can manage and bring, especially if you're bringing in junior resources, that you're trying to align projects that are there. But I would say this, from my experience, it is infinitely easier to get to scale by getting jobs than it is to scale by getting the right people and keeping the right people, because it is a competitive environment out there. So a lot of times I found myself making sure that, trying to hire, trying to make sure I had competitive salaries, trying to find some good nearshore and offshore. I've done all of the options. The bigger mountain to climb, I would almost say, is in the people than it is to getting the deals. But certainly get the deals first, because you don't want to be in a situation where, it's kind of like you take a step in sales, take a step in people, step in sales, a step in people, and understand that the people that are going to get you here today may not be necessarily the people that get you to tomorrow. So if you're using a nearshore company or something like that, they may be a short-term solution until you can build your own internal team. So just things to consider. Just take one step at a time and don't try to leap. I think would probably be one of the best things that I can share on that side.
And I think the next question would be a good one for you, Eric. So how did you go from a part-time freelance, your first customer, to full-time solo?
Yeah, so if you missed the gym on this one, you can go back to our conversations. Actually, Ben described it without even knowing it. Essentially, I started helping out. I covered the story. I started helping out people on LinkedIn. I found on the success community, I found my first customer that way. I connected with the Salesforce account executive at the time. And it wasn't intentional. I think there was just a lot of things that we needed to loop them in on. But essentially, they basically said, hey, I have another customer that needs a hand with something. And that's how it kind of started. So by building the relationship with the Salesforce account executive, I managed to start taking on more projects, building that relationship with the account executive. And once I started getting big enough, I started looking into bringing additional resources to help sustain the projects that we were taking on. So hopefully that's a helpful one. I'll pass this one to you, Ben. Gershon asked, besides going through staffing agencies, what is the best way to get a couple of opportunities? What's the best way to get a couple of gigs? So it's an open-ended question, but I'll see if you can tackle that one.
I'm wondering if this is coming from someone who does contracting gigs. If you're going for a staffing agency, I think if you go back through the conversation, we touched on a few. I think LinkedIn is great. I did a lot of cold outreach on LinkedIn when I was working for a consultancy or running a consultancy. So finding people in my niche that we wanted to focus on. So we did a lot with fintechs in London. Obviously, there's a lot in London being financial capital. So messaging people on LinkedIn, and sending them some custom success stories of things we've done for people who are very similar, and opening up opportunities that way. Events again are a good way to get leads if you're working at a consultancy. But if this is coming from a contractor point of view, I've never worked as a contractor actually. So yeah, I'm not too sure about that.
Sure. So go ahead.
No, sorry, you go, Eric.
All right. Someone, actually, Martin made an interesting comment here. And then they talked about experience with legal and commercial risks involved in consultancy business with clients. And I think that's an important one to kind of tackle in. So I'll just say it from my perspective. You definitely want to make sure you have some contracts nailed down. At least in the United States, there are basic insurance that you can purchase for errors and omissions to make sure you're covered just in case anything happens. There's so much that I can talk to you about those pieces, but above it all, there are services, and this is a little bit of a pitch, but we're starting forceAnywhere to make freelancing and consulting as turnkey of a solution. But there are other things like Ben. I don't know how much you cover this in the book that you're selling, but how to get contractually started, like making sure that your statement of works protect you in some basic way. But anything that you have on your side as well that you want to add.
So yeah, I mean, I don't want to provide any legal advice because I'm definitely not a lawyer. But we, yeah, I mean, the main couple of I've actually in my secrets building consultancy book, we've got a template pack as well, which has statement of work, workshop templates, and then we've got an NDA and an NDA, which is for the US and the UK, and an international consultancy agreement, which is for the world. For anywhere, and I would say those are two of the main ones you need to get started. So it's kind of NDA. So a lot of customers will expect an NDA because they don't want to tell you anything about their business for that one. A consultancy agreement, which kind of goes alongside the statement of work. So the statement of work is a bit more, requirements, Salesforce language, and then the consultancy agreement, which can be the same document or sit a bit separate, which is all the legal terminology in that. So those are kind of the main ones. But I would always get advice off a accountancy or a lawyer firm or anything like that. I'm actually doing a event in about a month's time with a company called Mushroom, who I've partnered with for my legal templates. We haven't announced any details yet, but we're going to be doing a session with them, like a Q&A where you can ask them anything you want to know about the legal and commercial risk side of things. So look out for that.
Yeah, that's good insights. A lot of good questions. We won't be able to get a chance to get to everyone's questions, but I like this one to close it off, and I'll pass it to you, Ben. If you could change one thing about how you started, what would it be?
Good question. When I was consulting, I don't think I played the Salesforce game enough. So like they wanted us to do a lot of events and webinars and live customer success stories and things like that. And we didn't have a dedicated marketing manager, so it wasn't I didn't really have enough time to do it. So I kind of thought, it's not important. We're getting a lot of leads and things like that. But on reflection, these are the activities that Salesforce really want you to do, and I think we talked about this a bit earlier, but they want to you need to show them that you're working hard for them as well, and you're not just receiving leads from them. So that was something that I would probably do more events with Salesforce and more webinars and things like that in the era of coronavirus. So yeah. And how about you, Eric?
For me, it was I was too cheap at crucial moments in my life, in my entrepreneurial life. And I remember one case in particular. I was talking to my director of client services, and we're trying to make a hire to bring extra people in. I remember there was a really good candidate we interviewed. We really liked him, but he wanted a salary that at the time I thought was just far too much. And it wasn't far, like we really weren't that far off. I think from an annual salary perspective, I think we were something like $5,000 off in where we wanted to be and make an offer. And he ended up going into somewhere else. This was not the one hire that would make the difference, but it's certainly something that a lot of times what I thought was fair conflicted with what the market probably really expected it to be paid. And I think in retrospect, if I had make sure that when I went with my gut feeling and I hired the right people at the right time, it would have helped us sustain the growth a lot better than we did. And growing our team was a big pain because of that. And I think I was a big bottleneck on that side. So I totally would have paid the 5,000 or whatever it was more in that case and many other cases, because if that person can help you deliver 5 or 6 more projects in a given time, that pays itself in full. So for me, that was one of the big lessons learned. So listen,
yeah, it's
we
something we
are,
actually haven't covered off much. And
yeah,
I was just going to say it's something we haven't really covered off in this, but it's the people side of it, the brand awareness, employer branding is so important to attract talent. So I know we're nearly at the hour, so yeah, sorry, Eric.
yeah. Maybe a topic for the next time. Maybe we'll follow up on this as a future talking point. But I completely agree. I'll wrap it up because we're right at time. Listen, Ben, I really do appreciate you jumping in. I think this has been a really good conversation. It's tough because there's so many ways that we can go. Appreciate everyone that has put their comments, put their feedback. Ben, I'll leave it to you for some final words.
Yeah, no, similar sentiments. Thank you for everyone for attending. This has been really fun. I think it's a really exciting time in the Salesforce ecosystem. I'm seeing so many businesses popping up of people doing consulting, freelancing, or lots of other interesting things. There's so much opportunity. So yeah, take advantage and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and ask me any questions on there as well. But yeah, cheers, Eric. It's been a pleasure.
Same here. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone's time, and we'll catch you on the next one. Yeah.